Yo, what's going on, guys? It's me, Jay. Um, yeah, I'm here to talk about again in the Heights. And after I made the video, like a day after, there was some controversy about the cast. People got on Lin Manuel Miranda's ass, the director, for certain issues about the casting. And the issue that they got on him about was colorism. They felt that the cast um did not accurately reflect the diversity of the Latino community and the Latino experience in New York, particularly in the Washington Heights area. There too many of the Latinos that were cast in the movie was too light skinned, too racially ambiguous, too mixed looking. In other words, like too typically Hispanic. But I get the point that they were trying to make, that the Hispanic community is a rainbow of colors, that the Hispanic community can look like anybody from Cameron Diaz um, to Celia Cruz to George Lopez to indigenous Peruvians and all that. But this criticism was particularly focused on Afro Latinx individuals, um, people that didn't look African enough. And I understand that criticism. I get that criticism because in the area that it was centered in, Washington Heights, is heavily the play, and in the play too, and in the movie, is heavily Dominican, Puerto Rican, and Cuban. And these three countries being part of the greater being part of the Caribbean, they do have a large Afro Latino population. Um, more of During the transatlantic slave trade, more slaves came to the Caribbean islands like the Dominican Republic, Cuba, um, and Puerto Rico than any part of the United States. You know what I'm saying? So most of the people that were captured during slavery and happened to come to the Americas came to these countries, and they contributed greatly to these countries. But see, a lot of people don't really know that because the dominant face in Latino media, both in Spanish and in English, and in English it almost doesn't exist at all. But in Spanish, like in Univision or Telemundo, is always light skin or um, white passing or Mexican looking. Sometimes you have indigenous people, but in general, you have a Mediterranean looking person passing for a Hispanic, like an Andy Garcia type, or a racially ambiguous type of person like Rosario Dawson or John Leguizamo. You don't really have someone or even a person who weighed in on this controversy. West Side Story star Rita Moreno. She's racially ambiguous. She is, I guess you could say, she is white passing. She is light skinned, and she said that Lin Manuel Miranda, that people should stop picking on him because we don't we as a Latino community as a whole don't have enough media to represent us at all. But I think this community is right in doing this because if you really think about it, um, people think that the Latino community is a monolith. People think that the Latino community is one community. People think the Latino community is Mexican, and that we all reflect the same skin color, we all reflect the same geographical region, we all eat the same foods, we all listen to the same music, and we all play the same sports. And that's not true. Um, like I said, during slavery, most of the slaves came to our countries. Oh, Lisa says that Rita Moreno um, backtracked on her statement, but still, she made the statement. She still made the statement, Lisa, and I'm still holding her to it. So whether or not she backtracked or not doesn't really matter to me. Um, like I said, most of the slaves came to our part of the world, came to Cuba was a huge producer of sugar after the Haitian Revolution. The Dominican Republic was part of Haiti and was the first country that Europeans um, began to deliver slaves to in 1501 when the slave trade started. So the African presence in Latin America has been there at least since the time of slavery. Some would say, if you read the book by Ivan van Sertima, they came before Columbus. Some would say that the African presence been in countries like Panama in Central America before Columbus, when Abu Bakr II, a king from the West African Kingdom of Mali, sent envoys to the Americas, and Columbus and them, the explorers that came, Columbus and Balboa, they found African-looking people, people that look different than Native Americans in these shores. Some would say the natives of Cuba, the Cibones, were of African descent. So you could go back further before slavery, but definitely after slavery. And during slavery, there were more slaves brought to the shores of the Latin American countries than to the United States. So there is a huge chunk of African in the Latino or the Latinx mixture that is not really represented in Spanish speaking media and definitely not in English speaking media, because think of all the English language shows or movies that you know that are about Latinos, famous ones. Okay, um, West Side Story. No Latinos whatsoever at all, light skin or dark skin. Everybody there besides Rita Moreno was Greek. George Chikaris, who played Bernardo, Greek. All the backup dancers, all Greek, Italians, Mediterraneans, and I think some Christian Arabs were there. No Latinos whatsoever. Am I gonna read Lin Manuel Miranda's apology? Yeah, yeah. Um, to this point, no Latinos whatsoever. Blood In, Blood Out, another movie. No Afro Latinos whatsoever. It was completely represented by Mexican people. I Love Lucy, even though Desi Arnaz's band was referencing an Afro-Cuban religion or an Afro-Cuban deity in Orisha in Babalu, he himself was not Afro-Cuban, and no mention of Afro-Cuban culture was ever indicated in that show. So, in the George Lopez show, the same thing. They had a Cuban, they had a Mexican or whatever, but different diversities and nationalities, but no Afro-Cuban, no mention of no mention of Afro Latinx culture at all. Erasure. you know, in any really form of Latinx media. And the more popular a certain particular genre of music becomes in Latin America, they have this thing called blanqueamiento, the whitening of it. So, where salsa was really popular amongst Afro Cubans and Afro Puerto Ricans, derived from the Afro Cuban mambo and Afro Puerto Rican bomba, as it became more commercialized, the singers became lighter skinned. Same thing with reggaeton, which originated in Panama among the West Indian expats there. It started off with the Afro Latino population, and it expanded to the greater Latino population. And by the time it arrived in America, the people that were singing and the people that were the faces of it were all light skinned. Um, Lin Manuel Miranda's apology. To phrase his apology, what he basically was saying was that he started in the Heights to be more inclusive and to be seen, as it were, in in the culture. But he apologized to people who feel like they weren't seen and they weren't represented. Um, I accept that. I think that there was a level of, and I was telling Lisa this, there was a level in the play where he could have made that choice. Okay, read the apology. Lisa, will I be able to find the apology online? You want me to read the apology word for word? Okay, I'm looking for the apology. Um, okay, he says, okay, Lisa sent an article. Okay, Lisa, I'm looking it up now. Sorry. Okay, basically, he's saying that he heard the pain of the people. He was saying sorry for, I'm paraphrasing, putting it in my own words. I'm not going to read it word for word. At least I'm sorry. But I'm putting it in my own words, basically saying that he was sorry that, he didn't represent the full range of the Latino community in something like this, and something that was meant to bring people together. And I truly believe that. You know what I mean? I truly believe that he did not do this maliciously. He did not exclude Afro Latinx people from the play explicitly. I believe it was more of it to show the contrast between uh, the characters that were living there and Benny, where, like, okay, if they were Afro Latinx and African American, it wouldn't have been as the visual contrast between why they had a problem with Benny and Nina's relationship would not have been so noticeable. Maybe that's a reason. You know what I mean? But he did correct it in Hamilton. Hamilton and had the story of Hamilton. Everyone's white. You know what I mean? But you do have Afro Latinx people. You have African American people in the new version of Hamilton, the versions he made. So he took heed to what people had said. I'm sure people said this about In the Heights when it first came out. This isn't the first time, but like I said, a movie is more. A movie is um, more widely accessible to people than a play. So there's a lot of people are seeing it for the first time and probably expected to see a large Afro Latinx cast and didn't see that. Like, um, you know, and the director John Shu, he didn't even know it was an issue because again, a lot of people don't know about the diversity of the Latinx community, about how we have diversity in color, we have diversity in phenotype, we have diversity in religion, we have diversity in pretty much everything. There are Japanese Latinos, there are Chinese Latinos, there are Black Latinos, of course, Indigenous Latinos, Latinos of Irish descent, Latinos of Welsh descent. Um, Latin America basically runs the gambit of everything. It's one of the most diverse places on the planet. Lisa says Hamilton doesn't count because back then everybody was white, but that was the point, though, Lisa. Everybody wasn't white. Hamilton uh, was taken during a time of the American Revolution. And during the American Revolution, not everyone was white. There were a lot of black people in those days. And the point is he could have just included light skinned black people or light skinned Latinos in Hamilton, but he didn't. Okay? And uh yes, In the Heights is a part of the city with a lot of mixed Latinos. That's true. But again, I don't know his reason. I think he just honestly he just messed up. You know what I mean? It could have been maybe his reason was because he felt like a lot of Latinos were not going to go see it because he knows the colorism exists. There is a thing in all minority communities, and this exists within Latino communities as well as African American communities, where, and we know this to be true in China, the Chinese Asian market, where if you have too many dark skinned performers, a lot of people won't. The general public that is implicitly racist won't buy it. That's why, remember, in Star Wars they didn't want John Boyega on the poster. You know what I mean? They put John Boyega on the poster in the way in the back, and you couldn't really see him. You know what I mean? So knowing this, knowing the biases that Broadway has, um, could have been what one reason that he didn't have. He didn't have the balls, put it that way, to be crudely, to really make that move and put a lot of Afro Latinx people. Okay, not true. Look at Black Panther. Black Panther, Lisa, is an example of one movie out of all, and it didn't do good in China. It didn't sell in China. It didn't. It only really sold here in the United States because it was for that time, and it came out in 2018. We're talking about a play that came out in 2008. We barely had an African American president. What made Black Panther special was that it was something that had never been seen before. If it had been seen before, um, it wouldn't have been as special. You know what I mean? Because it was a lot of dark skinned people in Black Panther, a lot of ostensibly African themes in Black Panther, but that was unusual for a mass marketed black movie that wasn't just marketed to a black niche audience um like Tyler Perry or whatever. But even that didn't didn't reach the, excuse the pun, in the heights of China. You know what I mean? Or the international market get a little bit skittish in other countries because white supremacy is a global phenomenon. It's not only here in the United States where there's an experience of white supremacy. Like Lisa was saying, well, Hamilton didn't have any black people, but the reason why we think that that time period didn't have any black people, or the reason why people might like John's show might be a little bit mystified, might wonder why. Okay, why are they making such a big deal about Afro Latinx people and the erasure of their culture? It's because we are made to believe, or we are taught to believe, that explicitly African themes and African people and black people in general only represent this time period, or a time period for slavery, or a time period of civil rights. Other than that, black people didn't appear in history. Like when they make medieval movies like Kingdom of Heaven, you hardly see any black people, right? Even though there were tons and tons of black people in in Europe in the Middle Ages. Tons and tons. They make one of the Jesus movies. I remember when the Bible came out, the Bible documentary, and people were like, "Oh, how are you gonna have a black Samson?" As if there were no black people in antiquity. You know what I mean? So seeing black faces in other contexts kind of demystifies people, and people have this idea like, okay, that doesn't represent that doesn't represent reality, because there's no black people there. Like there's going to be no black people in a show like Hamilton that's about colonial times, or a show like In the Heights that's about the Latino community, because there's no black people there. But that's not true, because every period in history there's always been black people present and prominent, you know? So, um, for him to not represent that, he catches an L for that. You know what I mean? Because here you had the opportunity to shine the light on on um on the diversity of the Latino community, something that the America never does. America paints Latinos as all Mexicans and they all look the same and that's it. You had the opportunity to paint the Latino community in a different light to a broader audience that wasn't just Broadway, and you didn't do it. You didn't take that opportunity. You went with the same exact thing that everybody else did in every other Latino community. I mean, Latino movie or show that I just mentioned. You know, so it wasn't really revolutionary. Okay, Lisa says in the Latino community there is colorism anyway, so I think that's why Lin Manuel Miranda didn't think he was going. Yep, absolutely, Lisa. Look at Sammy Sosa. Um, there is not just colorism in the Latino community. There is outright racism in the Latino community, and we see this reflected in the politics of a lot of Latinos, especially in South Florida. Um, in in the politics of the people in South Florida, many of whom are lighter skinned Cubans who were against the Castro regime, they always direct their vitriol at African Americans and Haitians politically in Florida. This is the case too in California, where there is often ethnic clashes between Mexican Americans and and African Americans, and this is the case in the country that Lisa was talking about, Sammy Sosa, where Sammy Sosa bleached his skin white. Why? Because the history of the Dominican Republic and its conflict with Haiti, and how the conflict centered on race and centered on the mestizaje, the mixedness of Dominicans juxtaposed to the blackness of Haiti, has produced a level of anti-blackness in a lot of Dominicans towards Haitians. So when they talk about immigration, they're not just talking about immigration because they're against a certain group coming in. Like, okay, say we are against in the United States here Mexicans and Central Americans coming in. We don't outright say that we're against them because they're brown and our country is majority white, and we don't want the demographics of that to shift. Some of our politicians do say that, but it's explicitly hinted. But in the Dominican Republic, it is understood that why they don't want a lot of Haitians um, in the country is because of racism. That I have a video from way back that they want to ban a lot of Haitians from the Dominican Republic because of racism, because they don't feel that they belong in the country. So Lisa is 100% correct in saying that colorism and racism plays a role, especially in regards to Dominican Republic and Haiti. I mean, in the 30s, there was a dictator in the Dominican Republic, Rafael Trujillo, that was aligned with Hitler and that shared Hitler's racist philosophy towards the Jewish people. He shared it about the Haitian people. He can look up the Parse massacre when Haitians were completely massacred by Dominicans. Look up my old video on my old channel. I'll post the link where I talk about why DR is having these economic restrictions. If you had a lot of Venezuelans coming into DR, if you had a lot of light skinned Colombians coming into DR, they wouldn't really care. But because it's the Haitian people and the Haitian people are black and they consider themselves black, and the Dominican Republic, the Dominican people consider themselves mixed, you have an issue. You have a racial issue. And like I said, it's the same thing here in the United States, where you have uh, lighter skinned Cubans who are richer, that was expelled by the Castro regime. They come here and they position themselves politically against African Americans and Haitians in Florida. Same thing in California. California, this is more a gang thing. Like the Southsiders, the Sureños, being against the, um, the black gangs like Bloods or Crips. That doesn't really figure into politics. But if that were the case, why do normal people feel the pinch? People that are not Sureños or Bloods or Crips. You know what I mean? So it is an attitude of superiority from Mexico, because if you look at Mexico's story, Mexico's origin story, you have the European element and you have the indigenous element, but the African element is taken out of the Mexican story. Even though, just like every other place in Latin America, there was an African presence in Mexico, especially in Costa Chica and the Veracruz area. As a matter of fact, Vicente Guerrero, who was the second president of Mexico, was a man of African descent. But you don't completely hear that because, again, just like with the cast of In the Heights, erasure, erasing blackness out of the Latinidad experience for various reasons and by almost every community in Latin America. Even the community in Latin America that is mostly um, the country that has more black people than anywhere outside of Africa, and that is Brazil. Even in that country, um, you don't have a huge representation in the beauty pageants or in anything really of Afro Brazilian people, even though Afro Brazilian people contributed greatly to the culture, both in martial arts like capoeira and in music like samba. Um, Lisa says, and from what I've seen this week, Latino people have said in the Heights, light skin. Uh, yeah, yeah, well, yeah, Lisa, because again, and she brings up the example of Ana Navarro on the View. Well, number one, Ana Navarro on the View is atypical of what I say. She's the kind of Latino that I said. Lisa and I spoke about this during the election. Go back to my Trump video, um, where I talk. Lisa and I speak about the anomaly of Cuban people, Cuban American people like Ana Navarro, um, always being right wing Republicans. Like you would think, well, Trump is against Latinos, so they'll be against him too. No. Cuban people are always Republicans. Cuban celebrities like Jorge Masvidal from the UFC, openly Republican. Little Pump, the rapper, openly Republican, openly anti-black. Right, and Sonny Houston, yeah, Lisa, you're right. Sonny, so and Anna Navarro's comments don't surprise me. Sonny Houston, okay, I'm glad she said that because she represented a view to me that she just basically trying to say like what It's bigger than the play because people say, "Oh well, just a play." No, but this is the first time ever that Latino culture, like with Black Panther, shine a light on African American culture. First time ever, really, that Latino culture has been shone a light on. And we had this opportunity, we had this moment, and Lin Manuel Miranda did nothing about it. People like Sonny Houston could have been shine a light on them, could have been shown about their experience, could have been shown about what they go through, not only in the larger American society as being Latinos, but within the Latino community of light skin versus dark skin. Hell, Spike Lee did it in School Days with the African American community. This could have been a thing. You know what I mean? And then the larger American public would have not only seen representation from Afro Latinx people, but also the struggles of Afro Latinx people. Because again, people think that Latinos are a monolith, that we all look the same, we all eat the same foods. People will come up to me as a Puerto Rican and say, "Do I eat tacos? Do I eat burritos? Well, I eat those things." But I don't eat them as part of my cultural food. People will come to Lisa and they won't even know where Belize is on the map. You know, um, people are uneducated on the complexities of Latin America, and this was a chance for Lin Manuel Miranda to shed light on this struggle in the Latino community between light skin and dark skin, the colorism, the legacy of colonialism in Latin America, and the double minority status that Afro Latinx people feel both as black people in the United States and as Afro Latinx. And he could have showed a little bit more in LGBT representation. There was a gay character in his original drafts, but it was removed. Again, I just feel like having it removed is typical. Because again, I mean, is LGBT erasure as well as is black erasure. But this kind of reminded me of speaking now that I'm speaking about the LGBT community and how the LGBT character of Lincoln was written out of the play even before it hit Broadway. Um, is the movie? There's a movie about the Stonewall riots, a famous riots that happened in New York City in 1969. And in the movie, I mean, in real life, the trans woman who started the riots, Marsha P. Johnson, was a woman of African descent, a black woman, and in the movie they showed as a white guy. So it goes back to again that erasure of African presence in significant moments in history, in significant time periods in history. Like the reason why people were shocked that there were black people in Hamilton was because we don't learn in American history the role that black people, free black people of color, played in the American Revolution. Could have had an Hispanic director too. Hell, Rosario Dawson could have directed it. You would have had a Hispanic director and a female director. But anyway, guys, that's my opinion. I do accept Lynn's apology, but I hope he does better next time. This is this is better than what's been done, but it could be better still. Peace. Don't forget to like and subscribe.